Most people out there have been told the same old line, all nuts are healthy. You hear it on commercials, you see it in magazines, your doctor might even casually throw it in as advice. But let me tell you something straight. That's a lie that's been repeated so many times that most folks never stop to question it. Not all nuts are created equal, and if you're over the age of 60, that assumption could actually be working against your health instead of for it. Here's the truth. Some nuts are packed with nutrition, full of healthy fats, vitamins, and minerals that can literally help your brain, your heart, and your joints stay strong as you age. But some nuts are the exact opposite. They're hiding behind the label of healthy, while being loaded with inflammatory omega-6 fatty acids, excess carbohydrates, or anti-nutrients like lectins and phytates that can mess with your digestion, spike your blood sugar, and keep your body in a constant state of low-grade inflammation. And if you're over 60, that inflammation isn't just a minor issue. It shows up in your joints, stiffer knees, swollen fingers, aching hips. It shows up in your brain, fogginess, forgetfulness, slower thinking. It shows up in your energy. You feel tired even when you've had a decent night's sleep. The wrong nuts can accelerate all of this, while the right ones can actually help slow it down. That's the difference we're talking about here. Think about it. The body you had in your 20s could get away with a lot more. You could eat a bag of roasted nuts from the gas station and barely notice. But once you pass 60, the margin for error gets a lot smaller. Your body becomes more sensitive to the foods you put in it, and the effects add up quickly. So when people say, just grab a handful of any nuts, they're all good for you, they're giving you advice that might have worked decades ago, but is now completely outdated for where you are in life. Let's talk about why some nuts are actually a problem. One big culprit is those omega-6 fatty acids. Now, don't get me wrong, your body does need some omega-6, but the standard diet today is already overloaded with it from seed oils, packaged foods, and processed snacks. Add in nuts that are extremely high in omega-6, and you're pouring fuel on the fire of inflammation. That's why so many people end up with worsening arthritis, sore joints, and even higher risks of heart disease when they think they're eating healthy. Another hidden danger is the sugar and starch content in certain nuts. Yeah, nuts aren't candy bars, but don't be fooled. Some nuts pack enough carbs to spike your blood sugar and insulin, especially if you're snacking on them mindlessly. Over time, that raises your risk of prediabetes, type 2 diabetes, and metabolic syndrome, conditions that already become more common after 60. And let's not forget the anti-nutrients. These compounds, like lectins and phytates, can interfere with mineral absorption. That means even if you're eating a diet full of calcium, magnesium, or zinc, your body isn't absorbing it efficiently because these compounds are blocking the process. That's a big deal as you age, because your bones, your muscles, and your immune system are all depending on those minerals to stay strong. Now, you might be thinking, well, I've been eating nuts for years, and I haven't noticed a problem. But here's what I want you to understand: the damage is slow. It creeps up on you, inflammation builds over time, joint pain builds over time, blood sugar dysregulation builds over time. You don't notice it overnight, but when you look back 5 or 10 years, suddenly you're heavier, your energy is lower, and your health just doesn't feel the same. That's not just getting older. A lot of that is directly related to the choices you're making every single day, and nuts are one of those sneaky choices people rarely question. The good news is this: once you understand that not all nuts are created equal, you can start choosing the ones that actually work for your body instead of against it. It's not about avoiding all nuts. It's about knowing which ones support your health and which ones sabotage it. The right nuts can give you omega-3s that calm inflammation instead of fueling it. They can provide magnesium that helps regulate your blood pressure, selenium that protects your thyroid, and healthy fats that keep your brain sharp. That's the real power of food as medicine. So the next time someone tells you to just grab a handful of nuts for a healthy snack, don't take that advice at face value. You've got to be smarter than that. At this stage in life, every food choice matters more than it ever did before. Choosing wisely between the worst nuts and the best nuts isn't just a small detail. It can make the difference between feeling 10 years older than you are or 10 years younger. That's the reality. Not all nuts are created equal. Now let's get real specific, because I don't want you leaving here with a vague idea that some nuts are bad. I want you to know exactly which ones are on the top of the do not touch list if you're over 60. There are 4 in particular that I see people eating all the time, thinking they're doing something good for their health, when in reality they're sabotaging themselves. Those are cashews, peanuts, pistachios, and chestnuts. Let's walk through why each one of these can work against you, especially as you age. First, cashews. Most people love cashews because they're creamy, they're tasty, and they feel like a treat. But here's what they don't realize: cashews are one of the highest carb nuts out there. They've got enough starch in them to act more like a legume than a nut. When you snack on cashews, especially more than just a few, your blood sugar is going to notice. That quick rise in glucose is followed by a spike in insulin, and if you've got insulin resistance, which so many people over 60 do, whether they know it or not, that's like throwing gasoline on the fire. Over time, that constant spike and crash cycle adds to weight gain, fatigue, and even prediabetes or diabetes. On top of that, cashews also contain compounds that can irritate the gut and trigger inflammation in people who are already sensitive. They might taste good, but the long-term trade-off just isn't worth it. Next up are peanuts. Now I know what you're thinking. Peanuts aren't even a nut, they're a legume. And you'd be right, that's part of the problem. Peanuts are one of the most common allergens in the world for a reason. They're full of lectins and other proteins that can set off an immune response and drive inflammation. And if you're over 60, chances are you already have some degree of inflammation going on in your joints, your arteries, or your digestive system. Adding peanuts into that picture is like poking a wound that's trying to heal. On top of that, peanuts are very high in omega-6 fatty acids. Like I mentioned earlier, omega-6s aren't evil, but when they're out of balance with omega-3s, and in the modern diet they almost always are, they push your body further into inflammation. That means more achy joints, more stiffness, more silent damage happening in your blood vessels. And if that wasn't enough, peanuts are also very prone to mold contamination, specifically aflatoxins, which are toxic compounds that can stress your liver and increase cancer risk over time. That's not a gamble worth taking. Then we've got pistachios. People like to snack on pistachios because they're fun to eat, cracking the shells, grabbing handful after handful. But pistachios are sneaky. They're higher in carbs than many other nuts, and just like cashews, that means more risk of spiking your blood sugar. If you're working hard to keep your insulin under control, pistachios can quietly undo your progress. They also carry a pretty heavy omega-6 load, which again tips that balance toward inflammation. For someone in their 20s, maybe that doesn't make a big difference right away, but for someone over 60, where inflammation is already the underlying driver of so many health issues, it's like piling logs onto an already burning fire. And much like peanuts, pistachios are another nut that's vulnerable to mold growth if they're not stored properly. Most people have no idea they're eating that kind of contamination, but your body feels the effects over time. And finally, chestnuts. Now, chestnuts are a bit different from the others, but they land on the worst list for a clear reason: they're loaded with carbs. If cashews are carby, chestnuts are basically a starchy food disguised as a nut. They're more comparable to a potato than to an almond. They're low in protein, low in healthy fats, and instead what they bring to the table is a sugar and starch load that does nothing but push blood sugar higher and higher. If you're over 60 and trying to protect your brain, your heart, and your waistline, chestnuts will take you in the exact opposite direction. And most people don't eat just a couple of chestnuts. When they're roasted and sitting in a bowl, it's easy to eat a dozen without even realizing it, and that's a blood sugar bomb your body doesn't need. So, when you hear me say not all nuts are healthy, I'm not talking theory here. I'm telling you plainly, cashews, peanuts, pistachios, and chestnuts are four you should keep off your plate if you're serious about feeling better, moving better, and aging stronger. Every bite you take either helps your body heal or adds to the wear and tear. Choosing the wrong nuts might seem like a small mistake, but when you make it day after day, year after year, it adds up. These four are not your friends. Now let's flip the coin and talk about the nuts that actually deserve a place in your kitchen. Because here's the truth. Once you cut out the wrong ones, you don't want to throw the baby out with the bath water. There are nuts that truly can support your health, help calm inflammation, fuel your brain, and give your body the nutrients it needs to thrive, especially after 60. The four that really stand out are walnuts, almonds, macadamias, and Brazil nuts. These are the ones that can work with your body instead of against it. Let's start with walnuts. Walnuts are like brain food in a nutshell, no pun intended. They're one of the few nuts that are a really good source of plant-based omega-3 fatty acids, specifically alpha-linolenic acid. Omega-3s are critical for lowering inflammation, improving blood flow, and protecting the health of your heart and brain. And after 60, brain health is something we can't afford to ignore. Memory, clarity, and sharpness all benefit when you're getting the right fats, and walnuts deliver them in a natural package. They're also rich in antioxidants, which means they help reduce the oxidative stress that drives aging at the cellular level. So, instead of fueling the fire like some nuts do, walnuts help calm it down and keep your cells protected. Then we've got almonds. Almonds are one of the most nutrient-dense nuts out there, and they've been studied extensively for their benefits. They're loaded with vitamin E, which acts as a powerful antioxidant and is especially important for skin health and brain health. Vitamin E protects your cells from damage, and that becomes more and more important the older we get. Almonds also bring a nice amount of magnesium to the table, which is a mineral most people are deficient in. Magnesium supports everything from muscle function to bone strength to blood pressure regulation, and let's not forget the fiber in almonds. That fiber helps regulate digestion, keeps you feeling full, and supports a healthier gut microbiome, something that directly ties into immune function and even mood. Almonds are one of those nuts that cover a lot of bases, and when eaten in moderation, they can make a real difference. Now let's talk about macadamias. A lot of people overlook macadamias because they're not as common or cheap as peanuts or cashews. But if you want a truly healthy nut, macadamias are a top contender. They're very high in monounsaturated fats, the same kind of fats that make olive oil so beneficial. These fats are excellent for supporting cardiovascular health, keeping cholesterol levels in balance, and providing a clean, steady source of energy. They're also very low in carbs compared to many other nuts, which makes them much friendlier for blood sugar control. And here's the thing, macadamias are rich, buttery, and satisfying, which means you don't need a lot of them to feel full. That helps naturally keep portions in check while still getting all the benefits. For someone over 60, that combination of good fats, low carbs, and satiety makes macadamias an excellent option. And finally, Brazil nuts. These aren't just another nut to snack on. They're almost like a supplement in nut form because of their extremely high selenium content. Selenium is a trace mineral that your body needs in very small amounts, but it's critical for thyroid function, immune support, and antioxidant defense. Just one or two Brazil nuts a day can give you all the selenium you need, and that's a powerful tool for protecting against oxidative damage and supporting metabolic health. But here's the key with Brazil nuts: you don't want to overdo it. Too much selenium can be harmful, so moderation is the name of the game. A couple a day is plenty, and it's one of the easiest ways to give your thyroid and immune system exactly what they need. So when you look at these 4 walnuts, almonds, macadamias, and Brazil nuts, you see a very different picture than the worst nuts we talked about earlier. These aren't driving inflammation, spiking blood sugar, or loading your body with unnecessary carbs. These are providing essential fats, vitamins, minerals, and antioxidants that directly support the systems of your body that matter most as you age. They help your heart, your brain, your bones, your joints, and your metabolism. They're not just snacks. They're tools you can use to feel younger, sharper, and stronger. Now, that doesn't mean you should eat them by the handful without thinking. Even the best nuts can cause problems if you overeat them. But when you choose these wisely and enjoy them in moderation, they're some of the best allies you can have in your nutrition toolbox. These 4 are your friends. Here's something a lot of people overlook when it comes to nuts. Even if you've chosen the right ones, even if you're sticking with walnuts, almonds, macadamias, or Brazil nuts, there are still 2 major factors that can turn those benefits into problems: quality and moderation. You can have the best nut in the world, but if it's processed the wrong way or eaten in the wrong amount, it can go from being a health booster to a health destroyer real fast. And that's where a lot of people get tripped up. Let's start with quality. Walk down the snack aisle of almost any grocery store and you'll see bags and cans of nuts everywhere. Most of them are roasted, salted, and packed in flashy packaging that screams healthy. But flip over the label and take a closer look. What you'll often find is that those nuts weren't roasted in their own oils or in a simple oven. They were roasted in cheap seed oils like soybean, canola, or sunflower oil. Those are the same industrial oils that are already wrecking so many people's health, and now they're coating the very nuts you thought were good for you. So instead of getting the healthy fats that support your heart and brain, you're loading up on oxidized oils that fuel inflammation, damage your cells, and make your joints ache even more. The nut itself might be fine, but the way it was processed has turned it into junk. That's why I always recommend raw or dry, roasted nuts with no added oils. If you want them roasted, do it yourself in the oven at home with nothing but a little heat and maybe a sprinkle of sea salt. That way, you know exactly what's going into your body. Another thing to watch out for is flavoring. Honey roasted, sugar-coated chocolate. These are nothing but candy in disguise. They take a naturally nutrient, dense food and bury it under sugar and preservatives. And if you're over 60, sugar is one of the fastest ways to accelerate everything you don't want: insulin resistance, inflammation, weight gain, and cognitive decline. Don't fall for the marketing. Stick with simple, clean, high-quality nuts. Now, let's talk about moderation, because this is where even the healthiest eaters can get into trouble. Nuts are calorie-dense. A small handful might be 150 or 200 calories, and it's really easy to keep reaching back into the bowl without realizing how much you've eaten. Before you know it, you've polished off half a bag while watching TV, and you've just added 1,000 calories to your day. Even if those calories are from healthy fats, your body can still store them as fat if you consistently overeat. And once you're over 60, your metabolism naturally slows down a bit. You don't burn through energy quite as fast as you did when you were younger. That means portion control matters more than ever. There's also the issue of digestion. Too many nuts at once can overwhelm your system. The fiber, the fat, the antinutrients like phytates, all of these in excess can leave you feeling bloated, gassy, or with stomach discomfort. That's your body telling you you've crossed the line. The goal with nuts isn't to make them the main event of your diet. It's to use them strategically. A small handful a day, that's usually all you need to get the benefits without the drawbacks. Think of nuts as a supplement, not a staple. And here's another point about moderation with certain nuts, like Brazil nuts. It's not just about calories. It's about the nutrient concentration. Remember how I said Brazil nuts are high in selenium? That's fantastic if you eat 1 or 2 a day, but if you eat a dozen, you're pushing your selenium intake to toxic levels. Too much selenium can actually cause health problems like hair loss, brittle nails, and even neurological issues. So with Brazil nuts especially, less is more. The other thing to remember about quality and moderation is that these two go hand in hand. If you're buying high-quality raw nuts, they're naturally going to taste richer and more satisfying. You won't need as much to feel content, but if you're eating cheap, oil-roasted, heavily salted nuts, they're designed to make you crave more and more, just like junk food. The better the quality, the easier it is to keep moderation in check. At the end of the day, nuts can either be medicine or they can be poison. It's not just about which type you eat, it's about how they're processed, how often you eat them, and how much you put on your plate. Choosing raw or dry roasted, keeping it to a small handful, and treating them as a health tool instead of a mindless snack, that's the formula that works.